Can you check now whether it is audible or not? Yes, okay. See, what I was telling is, I am discussing about the non-consequentialism. Non-consequentialism is classified into two types. One is duty-based approach, one is rights-based approach. In the duty-based approach, do your duty irrespective of the consequences, then that action is going to be ethical action. That is what they say. For example, the person who has given this consequentialism, non-consequentialism is Immanuel Kant. I am discussing about non-consequentialism. In this, there is duty-based approach, there is right-based approach. In the duty-based approach, there is called irrespective of our consequences, you have to do your duty, then that is ethical. This is Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant has given one statement about categorical imperative. Irrespective of your circumstance, you are bound to do a work, then you do it. That is called categorical imperative. Now, duty-based ethics in Indian context. Duty-based ethics in Indian context is known as dharma, right? In any circumstance, you have to uphold your dharma. That is the point. Now, see Aristotle, one should remain faithful in duty. That is what he said. This is called duty-based ethics. Justice is the first virtue of society. And they say that doing one's duty is justice. Doing one's duty is justice. Now they have said about justice is fair treatment. It is not necessarily to be equal treatment. Here, it is not applicable. But just go with this. One should remain faithful in duty. And Plato always said this. Plato always said that if you want to have a just society, then one has to do their duty. So Plato is the person who said that a society can be just, right? A society can be just only if everyone is doing their own duty. Plato clearly classifies human beings into three types. One is the philosopher kings. The second one is the rulers or the warriors. The third one is the producing class. What he says is producing class should confine to producers. The warrior class should be involved in protecting the nation. And the third class, that is the philosopher class, should be engaged in ruling. Now, one should not intervene into other duty. Na duty nenu cheyali, nenu vachi mee duty lo interfere avakudadu. I should not interfere into your duty. Then, in that circumstance, there will be harmony. Unless and until people do their own duty, there won't be harmony because there will be some interruptions. You'll be interrupting into my work, I'll be interrupting into your work. So, duty-based ethics, or Plato is the person who said that if you want to create a just society, then ensure that everyone is doing their duty properly. So that is called justice to him. And as per John Rawls, justice is the first virtue of any society so that the society will be in harmony. So these are all under duty-based approach or deontological approach. Now the second sections of people say that, yes, in the non-consequentialism, it is not the duty that is to be given importance. Rather, it is your rights that has to be given a prior accordance. Prior importance has to be given to your rights rather than your duties. If an action is upholding the rights of the individuals, then that action is always ethical, irrespective of the consequence. If you are upholding the rights of the citizens, then it is going to be the ethical action. For example, during the time of independence, we had this theory called right to property, which was a fundamental right. Until 1973, until Keshwananda Bharati case, right to property, and until this 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, right, 1976, until this point, right to freedom was a fundamental right. Right to property was a fundamental right. Right to property was a fundamental right. Now, the land reforms that was made by the then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru was considered not ethical. The reason is it is against the fundamental right to property. It is keeping limits on your property rights. As a result, many people went to the court and court said that this is not an ethical action, or the laws which was framed by the government is not ethical, and the same thing continued from 1947 to 1976. For almost 30 years, this rights-based approach was followed. Even today, there is much debates whether an action has to be right to privacy, right? That is one thing which says that you have to protect the privacy irrespective of the consequences of the person. In the name of national interest, you cannot compromise on the privacy. That is what they say. So these people, they say that it is an action. An action can be called ethical only if the rights of the people is protected. So this is called right-based approach. They don't give importance to duties as such, rather they give importance to rights. The best example again is Indian Constitution itself. Indian Constitution goes on the principles of rights, because fundamental rights are justiciable in nature, whereas your fundamental duties, they are not justiciable in nature, which means there is no steady and fast rule on fundamental duties saying that there is no limitation on your fundamental duties saying that you have to perform this duty. Rather, it is based on the rights. Rights are protected, whereas fundamental duties you are free to do, or whether you are free not. There is no compulsion on you to do fundamental duties. So, Constitution is based on right-based approach. Fundamental rights were given importance or accordance in relation with your fundamental duties. Hence, right-based approaches, all the laws should be made in protecting the rights of the people. Then they say that it is an action is ethical. Hope you got it. They believe that an action is ethically correct if the rights, that is the sum total of those opportunities which ensure enrichment of human personality, are enhanced. Opportunities which ensure enrichment of human personality. This is called liberty, right? Which is called rights. Right? Rights are to be enhanced. Then action is ethical. So these people, they were classified. Again, ethical non-consequentialists are classified into two types. One who follow duty-based ethics. The second one who follow right-based ethics. So your action, if it is fulfilling the rights of the individuals, then that is ethical action irrespective of the consequence. Now imagine a case study when they ask, say for example, if let us consider one example. Yes, Kavya, I will come to that point. Let us consider this example. For example, if you have become a public distribution officer, and if someone has come to you saying that you do not have, or they do not have the Aadhaar card or the ration card for taking the ration, at that point of time, as an officer, what action do you take? Right? This is previous year case study. No need to frame a new case study from this. The same case study can be applied even to your right to privacy also. They might give that in the name of the national interest, government is taking away the many, or government is collecting the data of the persons. How far can you say that it is correct or wrong? Now, in these circumstances, if you want to prove that, yes, what I am doing is correct, then go with the right-based approach. If you want to give the ration to the woman, to the poor woman who doesn't have the ration card, then the thing that you have to apply here is the right-based approach. As per the right-based theory of ethics, it is always ethical, and action is always ethical if it is fulfilling the rights of individuals. And right to food is a fundamental right of every citizen. Hence, irrespective of the norms that was written, I should go ahead with upholding the rights of the individual, because by the end of the day, it is going to save the life of the people. So in this direction, you can write. But if you want to prove the same argument as wrong, how can you prove? As per duty-based ethics, that is called deontological approach, I am not, it is not ethical to do something against the duties. In duty, it is clearly said that I have to follow these norms. If someone has no ration card, then it is unethical to go against these rules and give them the ration, because in that way you can substantiate. I am saying you are not substantiating from your perspective, you are substantiating it from the theoretical perspective, right? That's the thing. Let's go to the third point, that is called agent-based approach. Agent-based approach. Agent-based approach, it talks about the virtue-based ethics. I said that it is based on the agent. It is not based on the consequences. It is not based on the non-consequences. If your agent means the person, the agency is within the person, right? If your agency, if your conscience is saying that this action is true, then go and do it. If your conscience is telling that this is false, don't do it. They consider that it is the individual soul which is the best thing to decide an action is ethical or not. In any circumstance, if your rationality, if your conscience is pricking you up not to do an action, don't do it. If your conscience is saying that, yes, we have to do this action, do it, right? This is the agent-based approach. This is also known as virtue-based approach. They say that it is the conscience, not the laws or the rules, which is going to be the ultimate safeguard of ethics, right? So in any circumstance, follow your conscience, follow your rationality, and then that is called, then that action is called virtue ethics. So here, your intention, whether you have heard or whether you have followed your conscience or not, is going to be the ultimate thing. Example, again, Narendra Modi's demonetization move, right? It was done with an virtue thought, with a good intention. Again, you can write it in beyond this one also. What is that? Non-consequentialism approach also. Here, the virtue is common good, right? Then you can say that agent-based approach is one thing. It talks about primacy of individual character rather than the set of principles. Very important, right? You have seen many questions in the previous year asking that when the law is silent, ethics always dominate wherever the law is silent. Yes, it is going to dominate because law, rules, regulations cannot be defined for each and everything. There will be many areas where law will be not touching. Then at that point of time, it is the virtue ethics which is going to play a very, very crucial role. It talks about the primacy of individual character rather than the set of principles. They believe that whether the country has law, whether the country has code of conduct, irrespective of that, if the country is made up of individuals with virtues, who is following their own conscience, then that is the best form of society. For example, Plato is the person, Socrates is the person who says that. Obviously, Plato will come later and then Aristotle will come later. So the first person who has given this approach is Socrates, right? We have seen. And for another example for this is Babu Rajendra Prasad's statement. In the Constituent Assembly, if you know this, if you might have studied in Constitution, what Babu Rajendra Prasad famously says, there is nothing called good or bad constitution. If the people who are at work has the good intention, if it is a good lot, then the constitution turns out to be a good one. If the people who are working on that constitution is a bad lot, then the constitution is going to be or turning out to be bad. So this is what Babu Rajendra Prasad is also saying, virtue ethics. I repeat, there is no such thing called good or bad constitution. If the people who are working on that constitution constitutes the best part, then it is going to be best. If they belong to the bad lot, then it is going to be the bad thing. So you can use this one also, which essentially means he is saying that it is the individuals who is going to determine, or the individual's actions, irrespective of whether the constitution you are following or whether you are making a bad constitution, that is going to be depending on the people's virtues. Right? The moral virtue of human beings is going to determine the ethics. So it is the morality of the individual which is going to make the ethics in society, right? I said Plato, I said Socrates. What they said is, your society, whatever the society, I said whenever you are using society, you use the term ethics. If it is individual, you use morality or morals. They say that society is individual writ large. It is composed of individuals. So it is an organization of individuals. Hence, if individual is moral, then society is going to be ethical. In that society, There is no need for any law, any rule, or any source of ethics. The source is going to be your individual conscience. As far as the soul is considered, these are the Western thinkers who say this. Babu Rajendra Prasad, they had said in Indian context, and Gandhiji also is the person who says virtue ethics. Gandhiji believes in one philosophy called human soul. And he says that every human soul, irrespective of the country you are staying, every human soul in every country is made with an noble element to uphold dharma. So he says that human beings are so inclined towards this aspect called dharma that they should always follow their own conscience or their soul, because the soul itself is made up of dharmic principle. That is the goodness of human beings. That is what he says. Goodness of human beings is that the soul of humans is made of this beauty called dharma, or they are always inclined to do dharma. Whatever is dharma, they do it. So they say that, Gandhiji says that everyone has to follow his soul, which means everyone has to follow his own conscience. Across the globe, if you are following the conscience, then there is no concept of individual or national citizenship. It is not necessary for citizens to get a citizenship from a particular area. If everyone is following their human soul, then you will have one concept called the global citizen. You are going to represent the global citizen. You are no more a national citizen. He says that if one has to evolve from national citizen, which means not just a citizen belonging not just to one nation, rather citizens belong to the entire globe. What does he mean by that? He says that in entire globe, every human is made up of that constitutes that human soul. That human soul is made of dharma, that is inclined towards the so-called that soul is inclined towards dharma. Hence, we have to uphold that dharma by following your conscience or by following your soul. For this, he also says that if a state, here again, one more thing comes about Gandhiji. Gandhi never supported state, just like Karl Marx. Karl Marx also doesn't support state. This is again 2018 prelims question, right? Gandhi doesn't support state formation. Similarly, Karl Marx says we are not interested in any state, right? Why Gandhiji states that state is not necessary? Gandhiji says state is an evil, again in similar lines like Karl Marx. Why he says state is an evil? Because in Gandhiji's concept, state is an artificial element. It doesn't have the organic living, just like the human beings. He compares state with an artificial construct, whereas human beings has organic elements. Every organic element will be having the so-called soul in themselves. This soul drives the individual to do good things, because that soul inherently is consisted of dharma. Whereas the state, being an artificial element, it doesn't have any soul. The moment any element loses the soul or doesn't have this soul, then that is becomes soulless, which means it doesn't know what is dharma, what is adharma. Hence, state at times might do something which is adharma. Hence, he says that there should not be the state. State should not be there. Rather, it is the citizens who has to be enlightened. How they have to be enlightened? They have to be enlightened to such an extent that they will be using their own conscience in every situation. This enlightenment phase of citizens is called enlightened anarchy. In the place of state, Gandhiji calls for enlightened anarchy. state, as per Gandhi, is a soulless machine. Once it is soulless, then it is not going to know what is dharma, what is adharma, right? Hence, it is the responsibility of the individuals to ensure that this soulless state will not do adharmic principles. Hence, he says that it is not necessary. There is no necessary of state in a society where citizens are enlightened. Enlightened means they know what is correct, what is right. They follow their own conscience. In that state, there will be virtue ethics, or virtues always prevail in that society. That is the concept of Gandhiji. So it is anarchy state. Anarchy means there is no state, but it is not like what happens if there is no state. It should be jungle system, but it is not jungle system. Rather, it is enlightened anarchy. State is not there because the citizens were enlightened. And this is the same concept which Gandhiji says that if the state is doing adharmic principles, it is the dharma of the individual to go and fight against the state. This is the principle with which he launches the so-called non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience movement. Right? Why he does it? He thinks that state is having two functionalities. State is not having any soul. It might do adharmic principles. In that